ጤና ይስጥልኝ ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምን ሰንብታችኋል? ይህ የብርሃን ቴሌቪዥን ነው። የብርሃን ቴሌቪዥን ዛሬ 126ኛ የዓድዋን ቀን አስመልክቶ በትላንትናው ቀን በኢትዮጵያ ማህበር በቶሮንቶና አካባቢ በተዘጋጀው ዝግጅት ላይ በቦታው ተገኝተን ፕሮግራም ይዘንላችሁ ቀርበናል። በመጀመሪያ እንኳን ለ126ኛ የዓድዋ ድል በዓል በሰላም አደረሳችሁ እያልን በትላንትናው ፌብሩዋሪ 27 2022 ዓ.ም በኢትዮጵያ ማህበር በቶሮንቶና አካባቢ በተዘጋጀው ዝግጅት ላይ ታዋቂው ጋዜጠኛና ጸሐፊ እንዲሁም የታሪክ ተመራማሪ በተለይ በቅርብ ጊዜ የኢትዮጵያ ወዳጅ የሆነው ጄፍ ፒርስ ዓድዋን አስመልክቶ በአጠቃላይ አጠር ያለ ፕሮግራም አቅርቧል። ከዚህ በመቀጠል እናስተላልፍላችኋለን። ተመልካቾቻችን ባለፈው በኢትዮጵያ ጉብኝታችን ላይ የሚኒሊክን ቤተ መንግስት አንኮበርን ጎብኝተን ነበረ። አጠር ያለ ፕሮግራም ከዛም ቀጥሎ ይዘንላችሁ እንቀርባለን። በድጋሚ እንኳን ለ126ኛው የዓድዋ ቀን በዓል በሰላም አደረሳችሁ። ብርሃኑ ነኝ። ጤና ይስጥልኝ።
Okay, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Pierce, our keynote speaker for today on ዓድዋ celebration. Jeff has been supporting our movement when all the world was against Ethiopia, and Ethiopia was accused in many ways. The Western countries especially were against Ethiopia and supporting the insurgent TPLF. Actually, this group was termed as a terrorist group, even though it is a terrorist group, and everyone knows that it is a criminal group. They were supporting this TPLF group, and Jeff has contributed a lot to help Ethiopia. And he has been, I think, twice to Ethiopia.
Well, three times.
Three times in Ethiopia. And I don't know much of his background. He might introduce himself.
It's very shady. It's very shady.
And then we just start by listening to what he has to say. Thank you very much for being with us to celebrate this highly respected, highly well in Ethiopian history. ዓድዋ is a big celebration in Ethiopia, and I'll let you know. Speak, yeah.
Oh, okay.
ሰው ተከፍሎበታል ከደምና ካጥንት ስንት ወገን
Okay. Well, I actually thought there would be more in terms of the program. There was a blessing and everything, and I thought other people would be speaking, so that kind of caught me off guard. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the bald white guy that you see. The interesting thing is that I'll wait till you answer your call. I lived about 2 doors down from here. When you came in and you passed a shop called Siracco's Framing, there used to be a big painting for some reason of Botticelli's Venus right above. And the second floor above that shop was where my apartment was. And when they had a vigil for the Ethiopians that were killed during the disaster in Libya a few years ago, I went out to that small park And people were wondering, what is this white guy doing here? And that apartment, just 2 doors away, is where I wrote pretty much all of Prevail. So that's who I am. I have been back to Ethiopia a couple of times in terms of the war. That was funded by ECNES and APAC, and most recently the Rotarians. The second trip, I went in December, January with Jamal Countess. That was funded through the Rotarians in terms of the working funds, in terms of how we traveled around. And you can see some of my work on YouTube in terms of the reports that I did for Belagaro TV and for Arts TV. Anyway, enough about that. I'm here to talk about ADWA, but not just about ADWA in terms of its significance for today. Let me read you a couple of things from Raymond Jonas's excellent book on the battle. And everyone focuses on the battle. By 1,900 prisoners. The typical food ration consisted of a handful of chickpeas or barley to be crushed and mixed with water, then baked over the fire, eaten raw. To their credit, Ethiopian leaders insisted that their men share their hardships of their prisoners with identical rations for prisoner and guardian. Now keep in mind, there were still prisoners of war, and Jonas doesn't sugarcoat the facts that the Ethiopians would only tolerate so much nonsense from their captives. There was one Italian guy who was constantly trying to stir up trouble and revolt, and their way of getting him to knock it off was to hit him with sticks in the crotch. Boom! And that'll get you to stop thinking about revolting against your captors. But then you have this. Here's Jonas again. An Ethiopian soldier who spoke Italian offered reassuring words to his prisoners. They should take courage, for Menelik was good, and they would eventually be freed. Then the men, their bellies full and their bodies exhausted from 4 days of the march, stretched out by the fire and drifted off to sleep. And so here we are, in the heart of little Ethiopia in Toronto, dead of winter. Feels like -7 degrees wind chill. We're very far away from where the battle was fought, where these Italian captives worried what would happen to them. And that was celebrated every year. I've done this before at other events. Is there anything different about this year? Should there be? The answer is a definite yes. I've been to a couple of celebrations, but I'm guessing most past events had it easy, and by this I mean that the enemy was safely in the past. These Italian colonial fools who dared to think they could swoop down and carve out another piece of the continent for their sad little attempt at empire. They're frozen in our imaginations with their gaudy officer uniforms and their sabers and their antique rifles. Only as some have tried to warn us, the enemy never really went away. You have members of the Biden administration, with folks like Susan Rice, such a good pal of Mela Zenawi, doing all they can to put the TPLF back in the driver's seat of Ethiopia. Britain and Ireland haven't agreed on a lot in the modern age, but their prominent figures and representatives have taken an almost vindictive position over the crisis, determined to interfere in an African nation's internal affairs. And when these powers couldn't ram their agenda through the Security Council of the UN, what do? They fall back on pummeling and crushing ordinary Ethiopians through sanctions and breaking off economic arrangements. I am not Ethiopian. No big secret there. I'm not a member of the diaspora, but I am a friend. Someone close to me pointed out that I hardly ever, if ever, point out bad things about Ethiopia. And I told them, there's no need for that. I don't need to do that. Ethiopians don't need another Ferengi critic piling on telling them what's wrong with their country, as if they couldn't make these assessments for themselves. We're living in an age where black lives are supposed to matter, but somehow the most corrosively toxic and vituperative comments get a pass because they're said about Africans. Sorry. Mukesh Kapila, whose Wikipedia page calls him a humanitarian, wrote on Twitter that for him, many, not all, people in Ethiopia, don't you just love the Weasley-like Trump, equivocation there. Mexicans, not all Mexicans, but Ethiopians, not all people of Ethiopia, take the record for being the most horrible, racist, sadistic. He wrote this on Twitter. He said there's almost nothing to learn from Ethiopian history. And this unapologetic bigot still has his blue check and is still on Twitter. This is who you're up against. The war is still on, and it's important to understand who your enemy is. And it's vital to keep in mind how they prefer to fight and how they want to depict you to others. Everyone's quoting George Orwell's 1984 over how the TPLF like to rewrite history. But I find more comfort in a few other quotes of his. And just to let you know that I'm not one of those lazy idiots who just goes on the internet and plucks a meme off it, I do have several books by George Orwell, and there are more apt ones we can choose. This, for instance, is what he wrote about the Spanish Civil War. See if this sounds familiar to you. Early in life, I have noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper. But in Spain, for the first time, I saw newspaper reports which did not bear any relation to the facts, not even the relationship which is implied in an ordinary lie. I saw great battles reported where there had been no fighting, and complete silence where hundreds of men had been killed. I saw troops who had fought bravely denounced as cowards and traitors, and others who had never seen a shot fired hailed as heroes of imaginary victories. And I saw newspapers in London retelling these lies, and eager intellectuals building emotional superstructures over events that had never happened. I saw, in fact, history being written not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened according to various party lines. Now, you know what's really interesting about these lines? Today, George Orwell is our go-to guy over propaganda, media manipulation, the way fascists and communists think. But you know what he doesn't get called? A conspiracy theorist. Here's a white English guy telling you they made shit up about battles in Spain. Instead of treating him like a crank, both the left and the right wing camps consider him a prophet. We have actual video of Western diplomats encouraging a TPLF thug and asking, how can they help? We have them dead to rights, with even one of them saying to another, hey, let's talk afterwards because the Defense Department wants something, which shows they're still in the game. And what do our critics do? They try a smokescreen. Oh, they're retired diplomats. There's nothing to see here. Then why are you commenting on it? Better still, if they weren't important, why would this TPLF cretin be talking to them at all? Anywhere else, this would be outrageous. But it's okay for Africa. You had a news conference in Washington, D.C., in which famous nobodies, the so-called Uber drivers, were paraded out, a couple of whom could barely form a coherent sentence, and these guys talked about overthrowing the Ethiopian government. And this was taken seriously by the Washington Press Corps, and it was broadcast live over the internet. If you held a news conference in D.C. and a bunch of Greek nitwits talked about ousting the democratic government in Athens, you better believe people would hit the roof. But it's okay for Africa. Now we can argue all day. Is the tail wagging the dog or what? And I honestly can't tell you. Is it the TPLF in charge and the American leaders in D.C. are just that stupid, or are they in on it? And in the end, it doesn't really matter. Either way, the message is, it pays them for you to be a second-class citizen. You're African. You're black. Of course, we can't talk on Zoom about encouraging your terrorist group to take over a country, but we can hold a press conference. To which I say, ADWA. Again. Good. I spoke to 2 UN whistleblowers. The TPLF stole my digital recorder at the airport and thought they could embarrass these individuals. It blew up in their face because Ethiopians rightly thought, whoa, this confirms exactly what we thought all along. On any other story, you would try to reach the guy who did the original interviews, wouldn't you? Only one Western outlet made an honest effort to contact me, and when they did, they wouldn't even wait for my response and run copy, and then they said they would limit my comment to 2 lines, to which I said, well, I won't say what I said because there's a priest here. I said, screw you, anywhere else. But it's a story on Africa, so who gives a damn? Who's watching? To which I say, ADWA. Oh, it turns out there are a lot of people watching. Which is why you have reptiles like William Davidson trying to smear the No More movement as linked to the Ethiopian government. As mentioned before, the very idea is laughable, given that each of the founders, who I know by name, who I've spoken to, each of the founders want nothing to do with the government and throw up their hands half the time over how it handles communications. But facts don't matter to the other side. What scares them is that ordinary people like you, Africans at home, diaspora, their allies, realize the huge potential of a grassroots movement that speaks with an African voice. Can't let that have any legitimacy, because that's ADWA, and they'll never get it. ADWA wasn't fought for a king's ambition. It was fought to defend a country. That's not just unique for Ethiopia or Africa, that's unique for the entire world. That's why I say ADWA. ADWA. And you can sit around the cafe and have a long debate like students at a university over the Second World War and whether it was wrong to bomb Dresden and how it was a horrible thing that the Americans kept blacks in separate units in the army and how they bombed Hiroshima and how that idiot, the Duke of Windsor, liked Hitler. But when it comes down to it, when I really boil it down, it was still a good thing to go fight Nazis and beat them. And practically everyone in Britain and North America agreed, as did George Orwell, by the way. He made that clear because he wrote, and this is important, the choice before human beings is not as a rule between good and evil, but between 2 evils. You can let the Nazis rule the world, that is evil. Or you can overthrow them by war, which is also evil. There is no other choice before you, and whichever you choose, you will not come out with clean hands. Let me tell you something. The TPLF are African Nazis. I have talked to their victims. I have seen what they do. I have walked through a damn field where the corpses of their misguided, pathetic soldiers lay rotting because ordinary people nearby didn't have the time to give them proper burials even though they wanted to. You want to know what war is like? Go get a whiff of decomp. I have. I was in Lalibela with Jamal Countess and the TPLF tried to kill him. Long story short, they tried to draw him out and kept up a barrage of phone calls to lure him to a destination, and even after we left, they came looking for us at our hotel. And to their great credit, the staff of the hotel said, sorry, they didn't tell us when they left, and we don't know where they're going. And that is also why you don't hear me quoting lines about the Battle of ADWA to make it come alive for you like a movie action sequence. Because I've seen death, and I've smelled it, and I've walked through its debris and confusion and garbage, and there is no glory in war. But there can be a justice to it. There's glory over courage, physical courage, but that glory from over physical courage comes from moral courage. No glory, but justice. That's why I read lines to you about the aftermath. That's what I care about. That's what we all really care about. The fight is just, which is why I say ADWA. ADWA. When people pour into the demonstrations for no more, a good portion of them may like Abby and another segment may not like him at all and some won't care, and all of that is besides the bloody point, because they are there for Ethiopia. They're there because TPLF and the OLF Shene are slaughtering their family members and friends. They're there because these stupid white people who keep getting called experts and who have BBC and CNN on speed dial are doing a lousy, crappy job of representing civilization and trying to bully a nation into accepting monsters again. And if you are out there watching this, and you know who you are, I hate you for your barbarism and your smug, self-congratulatory attitude that you'll get away with it. You won't. because there are still Ethiopians who call themselves by the right name Ethiopians, and they will fight you. I despise you and will keep fighting you with my voice and my keyboard because I am sick of your slander of my friends who are better at being human beings than you are. I will take the Ethiopian sense of justice and compassion and what's right over your blood-soaked, realpolitik EU pragmatism and von Batten douchebag hypocrisy any day. I say to you, ADWA! ADWA! After ADWA, after the enemy was broken, was when Menelik and the Ethiopians showed mercy. Despite the myth, Menelik was not the one who pushed for castration of Italian soldiers or for the hacking off of limbs of the Askari. That was the hardliners in the circle, which included one of Africa's greatest generals, Rasulullah, and even Taitu. Remember when I read to you a couple of minutes ago on how the prisoners were treated well? This is something these Western observers never get or mention. When the Italians didn't learn their lesson and the fascists came back to invade, and after the bombings and gas attacks and use of concentration camps, and then the hard-fought liberation, still Haile Selassie told his people, do not return evil for evil. But today, we have EU envoys talking in public about the idea of delisting the TPLF as a terrorist group, all supposedly for the cause of peace. The Ethiopian government, of course, is free to do what it likes, and contrary to the idiots and trolls out there, I don't work for them. So I will speak for myself and say, before you show mercy, excuse me, before you show mercy, you must have accountability. As others have suggested, yes, as others have suggested, either hand over the top war criminals like Debretsion and Getachew Reda, or send them into exile. You can keep your filthy millions, but get the hell out and stay out and never come back. And then hopefully, possibly the government can deal with a younger, more reasonable TPLF wing that we've heard rumors about for months. And I guess we'll see what everyone does, but it needs to be Ethiopians who decide it. The difference between those on the Ethiopia side and the TPLF or OLF Shene is that those for Ethiopia take responsibility. The critics conveniently forget that a number of federal soldiers were tried and convicted of war crimes last year. Has there ever been such an admission or equal measure with at least some semblance of legality on the TPLF side? Has there?
No.
No. Exactly. And that is why you cannot give in. Why Ethiopia can never give in or betray its values. There is no peace. There is no fresh start unless there is honesty and accountability for what went on before. If you look at the Truth and Reconciliation hearings that went on in South Africa, no one handed the worst thugs of apartheid a blank check. Oh, there were some who thought this would be their way out. Nope, denied. they didn't get a pass. So we need accountability. And so far, there is none on the enemy's side. If you read the text of this bill, HR 6600, in the U.S. Congress, you're familiar with all this?
Yeah.
Yep, I have. It's a farce. All the punitive actions are aimed at the government of Ethiopia. The TPLF isn't on the hook for anything. You can't slit someone's throat and then complain, they got blood all over my knife. You know, it doesn't work like that. You are guilty of crimes. You are guilty of spreading misery and hate and destruction, and one day there will be an accounting for the fallen in Afar, for the dead in Amharic, for the lives lost because you stormed into Desi and you left floor after floor of broken glass and stole the precious medical equipment that could save lives. I say ADWA. ADWA. And you've got powerful friends. I'll give you that. To whom I say, who the hell do you think you are? You're elected to Congress, but you think someone gave you a badge to police the world? Unless you plan to invite Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and Boko Haram to help you govern the American people, my friends would like you to stop lecturing them on who should be a legitimate voice in their country. You want to give those Uber drivers jobs? There's a broom and a mop at the police station in Lalibela. They can start there. You better believe I say ADWA. ADWA. The fight long ago needed strong arms and quick feet and true aim, but it needed something more. The will to say no more. This is as far as you go. This is as much as we will put up with. Here's our stick to your crotch. Boom. And here's our vote in November. And here is where you go away. Becca, the enemy never went away. But the battlefields today are different, and you can play your part and help. All of you in this room, all of you watching this. If you can find out through freedom of information who's paying those Congress members how much, that helps tremendously. If you work for the UN and you've grown a conscience and you know the shenanigans they're pulling, drop me a line, because we can always use more evidence. Become an army in the streets, a peaceful one, but this time make your voices so loud that you make the pillars by the Lincoln Memorial shake. Make them hear you in London and Brussels and Geneva. Make them understand there is a new spirit in Africa, a new spirit among the diaspora, and it wants respect, and it demands the facts be properly told, and now is the time to deliver. And when they get smug and say in their usual doublespeak about how they know better and how things need to go the way they tell you they should, you say ADWA. ADWA. Look, I know how to do a rah-rah speech. Excuse me. I've done it plenty of times. But in every bit to stir up the troops, there's got to be some substance. And so it's time I said what's on my mind. And if I go a little bit longer, I can at least say I tried to give you your money's worth. Afar is still dying. Amharic are still dying. There are reports of potential talks with TPLF leadership and people. Many people are feeling disillusioned, betrayed, angry as hell, without direction. The movement is splintering a little. And I'm going to go off script here for a bit. I debated with myself whether to include this. You can see it's written in notes. It's not written down. Because in the past couple of days or so, we've got people on Twitter who are tweeting backing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is insane. Look at who the power is. The Americans, whether they lied or are so bone-stick stupid as to ignore that the TPLF had the power. They had the media operations. They had the money. There's the power. If you slaughter, as I said on Twitter, if you slaughter 6,000 soldiers in multiple military bases, you are the bad guy. If you invade a country that's minding its own business and you encircle them with all these units, you are the bad guy. And then we got people who come out and tweet, well, NATO encircled Russia like it's the, they were preparing. That's TPLF logic. That's the logic that said, well, Ethiopia was teaming up with Eritrea and was going to attack Tigray first. No. You don't get to say, I think this guy's going to hit me, so that's why I punched him in the face. That's insane logic. That is nuts. You know who has ADWA spirit right now? The Ukrainians. Do you know what this is reminiscent of? 1935. There's a country standing alone in Africa, and it's getting invaded by a fascist army, and nobody would help them. So what do you got today? You got, oh, well, we're going to send you a few helmets. We'll send you arms, but we won't come and help you defend your homeland. We'll base it over here. George Steer who deserves a damn statue in Ethiopia. He was your friend. He first covered the war in 35-36, then he came back in 41 to help with the liberation. He predicted this kind of thing. He watched the bombing of Harar. It made front page news in New York Times and in the London Times, and he said, if they can do it to Africans and bomb an open city undefended, they will do it to Europeans. Something like 6 months later, bombing of Guernica in Spain. This is what they do. So the Ukrainians, please do not side with the Putin, dictatorship against this country. So this is how nuts it gets. Don't let the tragedies embitter you to the plight of innocent people elsewhere. But overall, I don't comment on the specifics in terms of how the Ethiopian government handles its crises, because that's not my place. Now and again, there are efforts to try to get me hired by the government for communications, and the trolls, being idiots, assume I'm already working for them, which is incredibly stupid, because they don't get it. No one at the government in Addis Ababa will ever hire me for that, because they know I will always say what I think and what I think is the truth, and if you do PR, your job is to say what the government thinks. Plus, I swear a lot. Sorry. I'm not weighing in on certain issues because that's not where you either want me or need me. These things you decide. But I'll say this, it's up to you. Ethiopia never had a democracy before, ever. Even when Menelik went to war with the Italians, yes, it was for country, but it was for a country under kings. You had, for the very first time in Ethiopian history last year, and it's also a landmark in African history, a free and fair election with an overwhelming turnout. Now let the democratic machinery do its job. Use it. You don't like how Abiy and his folks are governing? Write a column, hit the streets and protest, send a petition. They can take it. I happen to know a few of them. They're very smart and decent types, and if they can't take it, they're not the great people I thought they were. Excuse me. You know, I watched a very bizarre and disturbing scene at the banquet where I had the honor and privilege of speaking in front of the Prime Minister. That was when I was over there in December, January. And after the whole thing is over, he wants to shake hands with folks. He leaves his table and wants to do the handshaking thing. He's a politician, of course he does. And his fans mobbed him. They're desperate to touch him, to get near him. And it was crazy because they're encircling him and his security team is batting people away, like literally shoving them back. And some of us are going, this is insane. This is not what you want. It's no reflection on Mr. Abe. He's a popular guy, not his fault at all. But you got to talk to security. If you set someone up for that kind of hero worship adulation to be a political god, then they can't possibly measure up, and worse, you can't move forward. This is supposed to be a parliamentary democracy that works on the unspoken premise that governments will inevitably fail you. That's why you have elections, you know, and when you don't like them anymore, you want change. If Justin Trudeau or Boris Johnson screw up, they get their asses kicked, they're replaced, but the government can still function. More importantly, you vote them out and the world does not come to an end. Democracy goes on as it should. So you have every right to voice your displeasure. I don't mean voice treason or say, go kill this guy or that guy. Or you need to start a new revolution. You had that revolution. That's why the psychopaths are out of office and up in Tigray and trying to murder innocent Afar. But Ethiopia is now at a delicate stage where it needs to feel its new strength, and it's natural that people want things now, instantly. That's not how democracy works. The battles are slower, they're quieter, they're often without glory, and almost always thankless. Too bad it's the best system we have going right now. Somebody tweeted at me not that long ago demanding I condemn the government. Now why the hell would I do that? It's not my place. So I wrote back, where are you? Where is your creativity, your initiative? You want condemnation? Do it yourself. Better still, step up and provide leadership and solutions. This is what democracy is for. Be there for Ethiopians. Get involved. Build the changes they want and need. And of course, someone didn't like that. Some fool out in the diaspora, I think the West Coast, they made me furious because they claimed my urging this was some form of intimidation. And I'm going to say, what? I'm intimidating them? And I was going to write a big long thread and I gave up on it and just blocked that idiot. But here's my answer to you, madam. Intimidation implies there's power, there's force. How the hell is encouraging someone to use the tools of democracy, that is their right, and to participate a bad thing? Has it come to this, that folks are so bloody ignorant that they look to government, never mind Ethiopia, but in DC, London here, for everything? So don't just tweet. Get off your ass. You want change? Make it happen. Organize. Write. Be involved. To this I say ADWA. ADWA spirit. ADWA strength. ADWA. Because I am only your friend. I don't tell you the specifics of what you should do or how the government needs to change because I don't live there or will ever have to pay the cost. I have only the spiritual constituency which you folks grant me, and trust me guys, I serve at your pleasure. What I can do, what I must do, is urge you to keep that machine of democracy running. The players may change if that's what you want. Elect them, kick them out of office, your choice. And keep Americans and Brits and Irish and the bloody UN and Fungus Davison from telling you who you should have in power. They don't decide that. You decide that. As your friend, I stand with you against those enemies. But as any warrior will tell you, and believe me, the fight's not over, you must defeat the enemy within first. The one that says, you can't do this, or we can't possibly win against a superpower, or maybe we can live with this crappy legislation in Congress choking off our economic blood flow. I'll borrow two martial arts maxims that I learned. They're actually from something called the Dojo Kun, which is Japanese, and there are interesting connections between Ethiopia and Japan, but that's a whole different historical discussion. One is strive for the perfection of character. And the other, which is more apt here, is foster the spirit of effort. GERD wasn't built in a day, and it will only keep flowing if there is a nation behind it. Many ethnicities, but one people, one collected strength. If there is a will, if you foster the spirit of effort, if you say ADWA. Let me hear you say it again. ADWA. Again. Again.
ስንት ወገን ወደቀ በነፃነት ምድር ትናገር አድዋ ትናገር ትመስክር ትናገር አድዋ ትናገር አገሬ እንዴት እንደቆምኩኝ ከፊታችሁ ዛሬ በኩራት በክብር በደስታ በፍቅር በድል እኖራለሁ ያው በቀን 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 ደሞ መከራውን ያን ሁሉ ሰቀቀን አድዋ ዛሬ ናት አድዋ ትላንት መቼ ተነሱና የወዳደቁት ምስጋና ለነሱ ለአድዋ ጀግኖች ለዛሬ ነፃነት ላበቁኝ ወገኖች